Hi, everyone. I'm Lori Sylvia. I'm the founder of Rally Recruitment Marketing, and I am so excited to be moderating this panel today on how to activate your employer brand internally. For those who may not know me, I just want to take a moment to introduce myself. I am the founder of rallyrecruitmentmarketing.com, which is an online community of almost 30,000 practitioners in talent acquisition, HR, recruitment marketing, and employer branding who are learning modern strategies and skills to attract and recruit talent through social media and digital marketing channels. And with me today on this panel are two of the mentors in our community, Charlotte Marshall, who is the Global Employer Brand Lead at Danaher Corporation, and Cheyenne Sexton, who is the Manager of Global Employer Branding at TE Connectivity. Hi, Charlotte and Cheyenne.
Lori.
Hi.
Thank you guys so much for doing this panel and sharing your expertise on employer branding with everyone who's watching the Candies virtual conference today. So why don't you both introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your background and also your current roles. Charlotte, you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here today talking about a topic near and dear to my heart because my background into employer brand was actually through an internal comms background. So internal activation has always been a real passion of mine, one that I think holds a lot of power and potential for us. I'm currently the employer brand lead at Danaher, like Lori said. And what makes me unique and different and interesting in this space is that this is the 6th employer brand at a global Fortune 500 company that I've had the pleasure of creating and bringing into the world with the help of a lot of smart people along the way. And I'm also the co-author of Employer Branding, a book called Give and Get. So thanks for having us, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you. All right, Cheyenne, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. I am Cheyenne Sexton, and as Lori said, I am managing our global employer brand at TE. Previous to being at TE, I was at Harman International, if you've heard of them, some audio brands, headphone speakers. But when I was there, I was also working on their global employer brand, all the way from the very beginning phases to launching that and sustaining it globally. My background before getting into employer branding was on the corporate communications and public relations side. And I started to hear about this thing called HR marketing or employer branding or HR communications. And I wasn't quite sure what it was. And then the more I started to be exposed to it, talking to people in the industry, looking at different resources, I came to learn that this was employer branding. And I'm really glad to be involved in it and getting to work on it at a global level. So really excited to be here today to talk to you about, activating that employer brand internally.
And both of you are being really modest because I just want to say one thing that Charlotte, your book, Give and Get Employer Brand, has been one of the most influential books that's been written about employer branding in this space and has taught so many people about what is employer branding and also how to activate it. So I am thrilled that you're here today to share your expertise with everyone. And also Cheyenne. So first of all, we do something called the Rally Awards. And back when you were at Harman, you guys were like a finalist in one of the awards. And then TE Connectivity won the best recruitment marketing campaign the last time we had the awards. So you've been involved in some really powerhouse employer brands as well. So thank you guys. All right. So what we wanted to do today was kind of explain to you why you should focus some of your precious resources and time and energy on activating your employer brand internally. And then of course, show you what does that look like. So let's start with why. I know that often we think about employer brand, we think about using our brands to attract and recruit talent. And sometimes we spend a lot of our time externally facing. But Charlotte, why is it important that we should also activate our employer brands internally?
This is one of the biggest myths that surrounds employer brand. I think most people think of it as this magnet. I prefer you to think of it as a smart filter, but something that helps you attract people towards your brand. And while it does in fact do that, there's actually more power, in my opinion, about activating it internally and reminding your employees why they should stay. Re-recruiting your workforce. I mean, if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Everybody shows up every single day of their own volition. And in a really good economy, there's so much fighting for top talent and so much movement within companies trying to retain that top talent, the same messages that you use externally have the power to galvanize and to empower and to remind people why you're such a great place to work. It's also really important if you think about it and you're focused on external, and a lot of our remits simply are, okay, you own external, it's a different team that owns internal. But creating that aligned experience, when you put your candidates in mind, you're only a candidate for a short period of your life cycle. From the moment you sign that offer letter, from when onboarding starts and through your new hire experience, if that's a disjointed experience, what is that saying about your brand? What's the impression that's making? Or more, what's the opportunity to bring the two together and to have this cohesive experience? So that's really another reason why internal and external should be locked and loaded before you go. And then this is something I've learned throughout the years, and I didn't always take this approach, but starting with an internal activation can really help you give some quick wins and insights before you go externally. It's like a smart test audience. If you built your value propositions correctly, they should be bulletproof, as Brian and I like to say in our book, but it really helps you see if it's embodied and embraced and what sort of advocacy you can gain from it. You want everybody starting to speak the same language, using the same vocabulary, explaining things in the same way, noticing the same behaviors and celebrating those. So if you launch first and people are coming in to meet your hiring managers and they're coming in to have conversations with your company, not only are you building a support base of advocacy, if something is a little bit off, you have a chance to improve that before it goes external. So that would be my answer to the why.
That's great. Yeah, I think you're right. Like I've been a part of some organizations where, there's some initiative that's launched and immediately it doesn't connect with the employees and people feel like it's just some corporate messaging. It's not really internalized. It doesn't really reflect what it's really like to be at the organization. So I think your advice to start first internally is really smart. So let's go to our next question. So I was thinking about the word activation. Like we use that word a lot, don't we? But Cheyenne, tell us, what does that mean? If someone is going to spend their time activating their employer brand internally, like what are those steps and actions that someone is going to take?
Yeah, it's a great point. We use the word, activate probably every day, and it's not something that everyone understands. They say, okay, all right, you want me to activate it? Sure. What does that mean? And I have that conversation, I think, a lot with people at the organizations I've been at who aren't necessarily on the employer brand team, or maybe even within the talent acquisition, talent attraction space. I'm talking to maybe employees or different parts of the business. And, how I kind of energize them and start the conversation is I say, what it really means to activate it means to bring your employer brand to life. A lot of the time, I think we maybe invest the money and the resources up front to create an employer brand or, an EVP. And then we let it sit there and we don't actually do anything with it. Or, we do maybe some small tactics, of course, and we'll get into some of those, but what does it really look like to bring it to life? So some of the things that stand out to me of bringing it to life and activating it is inspiring engagement. So finding those opportunities to connect and engage with your employees. So, whether that's testing it with them, having these different communications, bringing them into the journey and having them be part of the employer brand. I think that is a way that we can activate it, making sure that they have the right tools and resources. A lot of the time we say, or I've seen even, let's activate it. Okay, go ahead. And everyone's thinking, what do you want me to do? I don't know if I have access to that. Can you give me the tools and resources and I'll be that champion for you. Help me get there. So finding ways to do that. I think we can do that also through transparent and continuous engagement, through communications. I think that's probably more important now than ever when it comes to our current makeup of where we're at in life today and really what an employer brand needs of activating it internally in this really highly virtual space. So keeping that flowing. And then something that I've seen as really, really important when activating the employer brand internally is finding the integration and how to do that throughout your business, really getting to the core. That's something, honestly, I'm learning every day still of how do we do that? And I put some examples on the right-hand side here. I'm going to pepper those throughout the presentation. But ways that we look to activate this internally. And some of these examples showcase different executions that were throughout different parts of the business. So the big poster that you see there of Our Talent Connects the World, that's an example from Harman just showcasing what we really wanted to do to bring our employer brand to life internally was showcasing a lot of EGC, bringing our employees along on the journey. So we really started to get that imagery in front of them. And then on the left-hand side, you see on the bottom, it's a picture that I took of a flyer that I got in the mail from Harmon from our benefits group. So not directly within talent attraction or talent acquisition, but within HR. And it really spoke to me when I started to see EGC, so employee generated content, being used throughout our executions. That's a picture of 3 of our employees. And it went from seeing all of this stock photography to really being real life. And our words were really, our words and our tone were within that. So that was really great. And then also the ridiculous picture of me here, also really excited to see parts of the employer brand essence starting to go throughout our Harmon Analytics launch that we had there. And, they were really pushing the agenda of champions, trying to activate internally to make these champions who can learn something and then push it out to the rest of the business. So started to see these things work together to really bring it to life and get people really enthusiastic about the benefit of the employer brand.
These are great examples. I mean, what I'm already learning from both of you is, first of all, perhaps start first internally before you go externally. And second of all, it's not like a one-time thing. It's ongoing. It's continuous, especially as your employer value proposition and the way you think about your employer brand evolves. So that's a fantastic start. So why don't we look now at what does this look like in action? And I asked both of you if you would share your expertise by showing us some of the examples of your work. How do you get your employees to feel it internally so that they can then not only stay with the organization, but help you with your recruiting efforts? So Charlotte, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The first thing that we want to do when we're activating internally or externally for that matter is to remember that we want to build an emotional connection with our audience. We want to increase affinity with our brand. And I put a definition of what affinity means on the slide, but people feel 10 times faster than they think. So if you can create an experience, a creative impact, however you want to do this, keep this principle in mind, because when you can activate something that makes people feel something and increase affinity, then they're going to start to have a connection with your brand based on your values and shared beliefs. And that's a really good first impression. And I'm going to take you back to an example that I learned really early in my career. This is going back about 10 years. And the moment fundamentally changed the way that I've approached my work ever since. I was activating an employer brand at a company called Life Technologies. It was a 10,000 person biotech firm headquartered in Southern California. And it did a lot of work in the life sciences and the DNA sequencing space. And when I was looking for examples of stories to tell, I had come across the story of a man named Herman Atkins, who had been wrongly accused of a crime and had spent 10 years in Folsom Prison. And at the time he was committed, DNA analysis didn't exist. So there was no way for him to prove his innocence. Throughout his incarceration, he'd been writing the Innocence Project, a nonprofit in New York that helps people in his situation. And when DNA testing became available, they retested his evidence and in fact found he had been wrongfully accused and he was released from prison. I called the marketing team and said, this is great. Like, why aren't we telling the story? Let's talk about Herman. They said, well, we actually can't talk about it because we're not sure what equipment they used. 98% of them are created by our business, but there's a chance it wasn't one of our products. So I didn't take that for an answer. I just thought it was too powerful of a story. And I called the Innocence Project in New York and I had them pull out the case files when they analyzed the DNA. And they told me it was the AB Profiler Plus. Sure enough, it was one of our pieces of equipment. And then we got in touch with Herman and I said, we've got to tell your story. And there's this, our brand was all about advancing technology, but it was also about that connection, making that impact feel really real. So we invited him to speak at one of our all hands meetings. So when you think about internal activation, normally you would think about sharing Herman's story externally with candidates. So let's start internally. Let's invite Herman in to talk to our workforce. And at the time, we also found one of the scientists that had helped create the legacy version of that product. We invited him to the meeting. He didn't know why he was coming. He thought he was getting recognized for something else. And Lori, if you wouldn't mind playing the clip, I want to show everybody what happened during that meeting.
Okay, let's play the video.
I want to tell the members in the audience, I really have to ask that you guys give yourself a hand for working with this company or working for the company, because it is your work that has saved so many people's lives. So by all means, give yourself. In my opinion, DNA testing is the best thing that happened since the inventions of antibiotics. Reason being is because when you are in prison and you're told that you got to be there for the rest of your life for something that you didn't do, DNA testing said otherwise.
Maybe what we can do is have you meet somebody that is involved in that product development. I think we have Julio Malero here.
Yes.
Julio, please join us.
Yes.
From our human identification. Julio works on Profiler Plus, which was the product that was instrumental in Herman's exoneration ultimately. And Julio, you've been with the company for about 8 years now?
Yes, I have been with the company for 8 years now. And Greg, I cannot tell you how proud I feel right now of the work that we do in forensics. Can you imagine the impact that we're having in people's lives? Because our products help to not only bring the guilty to justice, but as we have heard today, they help to exonerate the innocent. I feel a great deal of satisfaction being part of that.
So under trying times or the circumstances that you face, you get up and you get at it because you don't want defeat. You're not going to accept defeat. And where is it written that you have to accept it?
Wow. Boy, is that powerful, Charlotte.
A brief snippet of a moment that I didn't even understand at the time was going to have that emotional impact. And I didn't know what Herman was going to say, but right before Herman took the stage, our CEO was actually saying, we're in the middle of an economic winter, and if we don't pull it together, we might not survive as a company. And we were in a down economy. This was probably 2010, 2011, and the company was actually struggling. And Herman heard all this backstage, and he told this story about how you guys have to get your head in the game. What you do matters. You gave me back my life. He talked about the look on his mom's face when she didn't believe him that he was innocent of this crime he had been convicted of. And then, of course, having Julio there, you can't imagine how many people went back to their desks just feeling like, even in a tough culture, and this was a company that was a tough culture. It wasn't a warm, fuzzy environment where everybody was giving out hugs and kisses. They were so motivated because of the end result of the work that you do. So look for moments like this. Not everybody has a Herman Atkins in this way, but you have something that's bigger than why you're there every day to remind people why they do what they do. And don't underestimate the impact of telling some of those stories by just inviting someone to speak at a meeting. So that's the one. I have another example on the next slide that's a little bit easier for everybody to execute on. And this is a good principle. We're often under-resourced in employer brand. Our teams don't come with the headcount, the budget, the investment that we need to do our job successfully. That's typically built over time. And we're up against some behemoths when it comes to actually getting our work off the ground. So sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it that can help you be successful. And when I think about the example here, this is when I was with Magellan Health, and we were at that moment of decision. Okay, we're going to activate and launch the brand to our employee base. How do we go after it? Typically, this would be a memo or a meeting that's cascaded from your head of HR or maybe your CEO, your company leadership team. Now, Magellan, we did a little bit different. When I had led the employer brand development, we created a steering committee like most of us do, where it's representatives from all different parts of the business. And we decided that we were going to have them draft a memo and it was going to come out to the business from them. And I'd encourage you to read the way that we wrote the memo, because sometimes getting rid of the corporate speak and talking about human in a human way on a human level can get so much engagement, and it catches people off guard. Because if most of the columns that are coming out of your company are very professional, like many of them are, and you just take this very human first approach, which is what employer brand is all about, the human side of our business, the people behind the business, and you speak to them in that way, you can get attention pretty quick. So when you're launching something, think about this approach and see how you might incorporate some of the lessons into what you're doing.
Fantastic.
Okay, and I have a few examples to show as well, kind of building off, what Charlotte was talking about there in terms of the launch, of an employer brand, and really, putting the people first focus on it, trying to make sure that you're not just telling them, you're showing them, your messaging and what you want to do. At Harmon, we launched our employer brand. So, built it from the development phase to launch. And that was in about 2019 that we launched the employer brand at Harmon. And, looking at the way we did the internal employer brand launch, that's what we did on the first day, of it. It was July. It was really exciting. And we were finding different ways to activate it internally. We changed the digital wallpaper screens. We had things in the locations because we were in person. We did have messaging coming from the CEO, but we also had messaging coming from, similar maybe to Charlotte, our different like steering committee and our advocates and our champions that we started to build, as we were ramping up. And one of the things that we did that I thought was really, really great, and it's still being utilized today. And I think, I've learned a lot from it, and it's something I can see also coming into play at TE, was we created this training that we wanted to use to empower them and to help them understand our messaging. So, it wasn't going to be just enough of us, a small employer brand team, a small but mighty one, preaching it to everyone. And it wasn't going to be enough coming from just leadership. We really wanted to activate and empower and educate a lot of at first it was our champion network, or our employer brand ambassador network, HR, talent acquisition, and maybe a few other pockets of talent management, along with individual people within the businesses, because the employer brand was we needed the support of the business to be able to launch it forward. And so this training allowed us to showcase to them, what is our EVP? Because that was new as well. What does it mean? And not just, at Harmon, we blah, 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 but really getting into the personal message. What does it mean? How do they translate it to potential candidates? How do they translate it to their teams? And how can they be part of it? So, and this training, I loved it. And something that was really special about it too, it was through the university. So it's called Harmon University. And it's really like our training platform that we go on to. And they have a lot of trainings there, very, very helpful. And with this one, we wanted to take a different approach and not making like a traditional hour format or maybe 30-minute format. We knew we want the employer brand to be simple. We want them to like it, and we want them to get the message and start to activate. And so this was about 15, 20 minutes. And we required it for a specific audience, but then anyone who started to join our different networks or wanted to learn more about the employer brand, this was always one of the first resources that we gave them. So it allowed us to really get that initial, communication going, but then see maybe where we have gaps with that audience once they were using this tool. So I really, really liked starting off with giving them the right resources and training, because training is so important to a lot of our companies, really down to the core. And then on the next slide here, kind of going from training those individuals, and I know I mentioned our employer brand ambassador network, something, another really, really great example that's happened at, various companies, and I'm sure everyone here too has a good example, is how to harness the power of our employees. Because as we said, we're in the game of people here. Our employees are our greatest asset. We know that. We probably all repeat that every day. But how do we bring them together? And so, I really put here, we have to rally the troops, bring them together, give them some structure, and then show them the impact of their stories. I think a lot of the time, and this was kind of my view, we might request things from our different groups, but they don't really see how they're part of the larger story. And if this is so focused on them, we need to make sure that we're bringing them along on that journey. So I think finding ways to do that for them is very beneficial. You can do that through an employer brand ambassador program or a champion network or whatever it's called for you. I think that's a really great way to bring everyone together. At Harmon, we started one with the launch of the employer brand, and it actually grew organically over the time of a year and basically doubled in size. Wow. And it was just, it was really cool. I've been thinking back with this presentation, how the success of that was, but people started to hear about the brand from internal activations and wanted to be part of that message. So they really felt something strong that they could come and support. And the same is with TE as well, really trying to find a way to harness the power of those champions, bring them together. You can also do it through email newsletters, maybe different collaboration calls with them to let them know that their voice is heard, and then maybe explore a specific topic that could strengthen the employer brand. Internal social platforms, that was also very beneficial. I know from what's going on at TE and as well at Harmon, that was really helpful. And then local or virtual events. I think finding ways to maybe keep the employer brand globally consistent but locally relevant is so important, not only in external but also internal activation. So bringing that culture to life and allowing them to activate in that way, I think, has been very successful so far. So those are two examples that stand out to me.
These are fantastic examples and a lot of great insight. And I think another thing I'm learning from both of you is just the strong connection between employer brand and company culture, and how much of an influence you guys are having actually on company culture. So, all right. So if the folks listening at the Candies Virtual Conference want to get started with activating their employer brand internally, or maybe they've already started, but they want to sort of take it up to the next level, we put together the top 10 activation pro tips. So Charlotte, tell us the first 5.
All right. If you can, plan an event. Don't underestimate. You can do this virtually. Back in the day, we used to might get together, but we don't even remember what that feels like anymore. But create a moment to celebrate. Make it educational. Teach people what it is. Get your executive sponsors sort of talking about and championing it. You can send a little swag in the mail. But a kickoff date just makes it feel more formal, and it can give people something to celebrate because so many people contributed to the project. So it can be a nice recognition opportunity, as well as that permission and kickoff to really start loving what you've created. When I haven't had a lot of budget and I'm looking at a way to activate internally, one of the things we did at Thermo Fisher was really successful was a refresh referral campaign. We had a great referral program. We rebranded it under the new brand, and then we pushed it out. Everybody was interested in making that extra cash, but having it take on the embodiment of the look and feel. You actually can get your brand in front of a huge number of your workforce in a short amount of time. And it only costs updating a couple of digital profiles or files or assets. It doesn't take as much lift as you would think as some of the other activation techniques. I love a culture book. Lori, you were just talking about culture. Think about everybody being given a culture book on their first day and everybody being given it around kickoff date, reminding people what you stand for and how you can champion and embody the elements and the values that are within your organization. I've seen, of course, Netflix is known for having a great culture book. I think we've shared with the Rally audience the GVC culture book. That's just phenomenal. I strongly recommend, now this one's a little bit bigger of a lift, but if you're looking to make an impact, think about this one. Office signage. So think back to the Herman Atkins example I shared with you. When we were activating at Life Technologies, we did an internal advertising campaign on our walls. All the stories that we gathered of our workforce, we actually put them on our walls as signage in designated areas. So it would be a story based on that business line or that would really resonate with different pockets of our workforce. And then we started thinking about, well, we are manufacturing and distribution centers, and they're not at desks. What do? Lore talkers. For every Herman Atkins that I brought in and it resonated with someone making that product, we would switch out every quarter talkers on the floor, reminding people of the person who's benefiting from their work every day. And it had a huge impact on engagement in some sites that were struggling before. And then finally, an employer brand cheat sheet. I have learned this lesson the hard way many, many times. Not having a recruiting background myself, when trying to drive recruiter adoption, I can remember many recruiters looking at me like I was a little bit out of my depths. I equate it to handing someone a scalpel and asking them to perform an appendectomy when they're a recruiter. When I've rolled out my employer brand, like, what do you want me to do with this? How do I do this? Like, Charlotte, I'm not a marketer. I don't think this way. Make it easy. Make a cheat sheet that says, okay, in the first 30 days, the first week, here's some things that you can do to help. Here's the key messages we want you to use with candidates, and here's some stuff we want you to share on social. Those would be my top 5. Cheyenne, what do you have to add?
Yeah, those are great. And definitely going to add to that list. I feel like we could probably go on forever too, but some of those ones that stood out to me was, we're talking about the people game here. So think about investing in the switch from stock to non-stock photos. I preach this. You could probably ask anyone and they're probably tired of hearing it from me. I know sometimes it's a bigger investment. It depends, of course, if it's across various platforms that you're utilizing internally, but think about it. You're going to launch maybe a new program, or you're trying to push people through maybe a specific part on your internal website, and how you're doing that in your emails and your messages, and maybe even the button on the page, it's a stock photo, but we're trying to be authentic. It really doesn't align. So think about investing in that, maybe in a phased approach, because I know it can get pretty costly. Activating champions. I know we all have preached that enough, but I think that is an absolutely, a really great way to activate your employer brand internally. Giving some structure, but encouraging some flair. So everyone, I know sometimes people, they want to know and see some guidelines, but usually, especially when you're working with global organizations, they're very matrix, they're very different, but we need to show them the value of following this structure to be consistent. But then it, comes to that whole consistent, but locally relevant. So allowing for them to execute and activate, in the way they see fit as well, to follow along with the employer brand. Focus on authenticity. I think that one, it goes without saying, but really try to put your people and what they like and what they don't like, and the culture at the forefront. Really try to find ways to do that. And then, of course, with all that you do, and really what I've seen to be the big changer is finding ways to align with the business and integrate into the employee life cycle. I believe Charlotte touched on that at the beginning of, really thinking about, imagine if someone saw something from like the moment they started all throughout, and even as we get into external, think about what people see externally, the experience they get once they come in, really making sure that it's integrated into the core. And this could be through, I have a few ideas because it's things that I'm excited about, but maybe through your onboarding process, your employee performance review. Why can't we be reviewed on our employer brand values or our EVP? Is that integrated into your process? So just thinking about ways to really bring it full cycle into your company.
Wow, that could, to partner up with HR and have as part of your performance review process, how well are you living up to the company values? That'd be pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So these are awesome, guys. Thank you so much for this top 10 list. I love a good top 10 list. And as we wrap up here, I just want to invite everyone to join the Rally community. It's free. We've got lots of great resources that can inspire you and teach you, from idea books to how-to guides, as well as we do webinars, and we do a virtual conference twice a year in May and December. And Charlotte has graciously offered to share a free chapter from her Give and Get employer branding book. So you can go to this bit.ly address, bit.ly/givegetbook, and download your free chapter. So we just want to say thank you so much for having us. And we really appreciated being here at the Candidates virtual conference. And if you guys want to reach out to us in any way and ask us some questions, we'd love to answer those for you.
Thanks for having us. It's lovely to be here. Those chapters, it's actually more like 3, because when I looked at the book, we had chapters on internal activation, because it might be a passion of mine. So I wanted everyone to have the benefit of that thinking. So please go on and download it and let me know what you think. You can catch me on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much, everyone.